Hello and welcome. I hope that all is good with you. Today, I'm going to choose to talk about choice. Shakespeare wrote All the World's a Stage, and I think in many ways he's absolutely right. When we interact with people, there can be a performative nature to it. We're aware very often of our place in the social construct and we can act accordingly. In the moment, we're in the play. The world is a stage and we are the main character. Most of the time, for many of us, in our own lives. It's us we think about more often than not. Doesn't mean to say we don't think about other people, but we can be preoccupied with how we look, how we come across, how cool or not we may appear, and so on. So there is a preoccupation, but also, of course, when we're in the moment as the main character, how we act, what we say and what we do has an impact. If you've ever looked at any outtakes from movies or looked at things when they've gone wrong, you will see that, of course, it can change the outcome. Somebody ad-libs something, and often that ad-lib, well, not often, but sometimes that ad-lib is kept in a movie.
Like tears in rain.
With some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
If you've ever been involved in a play or perhaps Amdram, you'll be aware that certain things have to happen at a certain time. So Miss Smith takes the cup of tea over there. Mr. Smith at that point sits down, and then our main character, let's say, says something, and based on what the timing of that is, the other character has got to reply, and so on. You get the idea. When someone misses their cue or says the wrong thing, it can throw things out. It's very interesting when that happens to me. Very, very interesting indeed, because we can see it in terms of the outtakes or the ad-lib that goes wrong or the one that stays in the movie. And there was a change in outcome. Things were different depending on what that character, not always a main character, says or does. And if you then consider that in life, when we do or say something, there is a cascade. We cause different things to happen, or we may cause different things to happen depending on what we said, how we said it, and when we said it. Rehearsing things before you get there can help us act in the most, let's say, beneficial way possible.
Then I tell them it's like watching a movie. It's essentially what it is. Sometimes it's like you're sitting in the stands watching yourself swim. And sometimes it's like you're in the water swimming. The key to visualization is, number one, it has to be very vivid. It has to be rehearsed many, many times.
If you think about what you are thinking about before you get to a certain point and consider that you are an actor in your own play and, as I've mentioned already, as often as not the main character, then it's important, I'm sure you will agree, that you say the right lines in the right way at the right time. And of course, that's not always possible. Of course, it's sometimes, well, practically impossible, particularly when we're really scared or frightened or stressed or harassed or whatever. But if we're taking care of our baseline psychological health, then very often we can focus in the moment. We can focus on us and consider what we're going to say. And this would be a point where mental rehearsal of a certain thing before we get there can benefit us. The brain doesn't always recognize the difference between that which is imagined and that which is real. So if we can imagine ourselves saying certain things at a certain point in time, like rehearsing a speech or rehearsing for a play, then we go through it in our minds, and then in reality, we've kind of already began to carve out some of those neural pathways, like a future memory of how this will look before we get there. Then it's easier very often for us to say those things. So we can rehearse what we're going to say. Sometimes in the moment, we don't know what's going to happen, of course, because life can be random, it can be unpredictable, and so it's difficult to rehearse for that. But what we can think about is us as the main character. If we were being the best versions of ourselves, what would we say in that moment? And so, one strategy, rehearse. Mentally rehearse it. If we know the situation we're going to be in and we practice it again and again and again in our minds, it can help us deliver that line in the right way. The line which we hope will give us the outcome that we want. Can't be guaranteed. Of course it can't be guaranteed because there are other factors. But the one that is most likely or more likely to give us that output that we want. And if we do that again and again and again in different situations, I hope you will agree that ultimately through time, we begin to stack the deck in our favour. It's not certain. Life isn't certain in most of its iterations, but we begin to shift the dial. How many times do we put our foot in it? How many times do we say things and we kick ourselves because we think, oh, I didn't mean to offend that individual, or I could have acted in a more professional manner in that moment. And so, as I've suggested, we can rehearse it if we've kind of got an idea that something may be going to happen. There's a situation where we want to turn up and say a line or two in real life. I'm not talking necessarily about a speech. And that can tip the balance. It can allow us to say those things because we've rehearsed it. We've begun to create those circuits in our mind. But also, as I was saying, because life is unpredictable, there would be moments where we aren't really aware that something was going to happen. And if we are the main character in our own place, and if we want to do the right thing, which is to be the best version of ourselves, then when something happens, we want to react in a way that is aligned to the best version of ourselves. And that being the case, then what we can do is we can say, all right, okay, I had a little bell in the background. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. This was not rehearsed. This is happening live. It is a little bit irritating because I may run out of battery. I don't have much time to record this, and so on and so forth. So what I could turn and do is go, for goodness sake, who's delivering something? Who's at that front door? Why did someone not turn off that bell? Which again, this may sound a little bit odd if you didn't hear it, but it was there. I promise I could hear it. And that reaction in that moment isn't really conducive, in my opinion, to a professional image, but also to people's well-being around. Because when others, you've experienced this no doubt, when others get annoyed, when they get irritated, when they get angry, we don't really like it. We might want to go and help, but it is unsettling for us because those emotions transmit. We pick up those emotions. And therefore, the best version of me is someone who, and this may well be like you as well, is someone who, when things go a bit wrong, they can say, okay, that's interesting. I wish that hadn't have happened, but what can we do? What can we learn from this? What can we do to overcome this particular issue? Or if we face criticism and somebody says, hey, didn't like that, rather than say, well, hold on a moment, you are really annoying, and same thing back at you, and so on. And that reactive, that emotional lability is, generally speaking, not good for us and not good for the people around us. This, of course, let me stop and go around this little loop for a second. this, of course, is entirely understandable in a lot of situations, and it is part of the human condition. So I'm not saying that we become robots. What I'm saying is, if the ability, the tendency to react like a little bit like a firecracker and go off when it's not really appropriate, and we do that as a habit, then that can, of course, mean that we're doing that in different situations. It's becomes part of us. It's a trait that we have. And I don't think that that's a good trait. It's not necessarily being Buddha all the time, because we're all flawed. I definitely am. But it's aspiring to be better in those moments. And if you think about what you value, who is this best version of you? Who is this good you? If this best version of you is someone who is kinder, that would be one of my goals. If this best version is someone who's less reactive, that would be one of my goals as well. If this best version of you is someone who doesn't get bothered by the little things as much. Remember that book from a few years ago, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff? It was all the rage, still incredibly relevant today. So someone who would ride across things, who wouldn't get dragged down, who wouldn't deplete their emotional energy bothering about the stuff that really tomorrow we will have forgotten about. And again, helping people and judging less. So all of that stuff. Will I ever be perfect at it? No. However, if it's something that you think, yeah, I'd kind of like to go down that route as well, then this may help. Essentially, it is to think about, in the moment, just taking a mental breath, taking a mental step back and saying, okay, if I'm going to be this kinder person, this less judgmental person, this individual who isn't going to fly off the handle, what would I say in this moment? What would I do? And if the emotion hasn't overtaken us, it hasn't enveloped us and pulled us into the murky depths of emotional thinking and behavior, then it is possible to have that vision of who we are, because you will have been thinking about it. And if you haven't, I would encourage you to think about it. What does the best version of me do? How do they walk? How do they sound? How do they act? How do they interact in different situations? And with that kind of loose but wider mental rehearsal that's going on, right? Okay, I'm going to be this person today. When that situation pops in, when it crops up, then we're more likely, I'm not saying this will always happen, we're more likely to be able to say, right, I choose in this moment to not react in that old way, to say, hey, that was interesting. I'm not sure I share that opinion, but let me hear more about why you think that might be the case. Or, hold on a second, that person did this, but maybe they're having a bad day. Hold on a second, maybe something was going on with this particular group of people that I don't know about, and this is why I'm seeing this particular reaction over here right now. Or that individual says things and does things that I don't really agree with. But if it's not actually attacking you, then maybe we can reserve judgment. We can not be judgmental. This doesn't mean to say we shouldn't defend ourselves. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just suggesting that if all the world is a stage, then consider the difference it would make in your life if you consistently reached for that better response to things rather than emotionally reacting. We all will, of course. Again, we're not going to turn into some emotionless robot, but if we reduced the number of times and the different types of situations, if those were reduced, and when we did react, when we did get into, let's say, anger, it was with due cause. There was a good reason for it. So we don't sweat as much the small stuff. We don't overreact. We rise above it. We become more calm, and therefore we are more likely to be able to not only be the best versions of ourselves, to practice those things that we want to practice, like the non-judgmental thinking and kindness, but it allows us to generally, in my opinion, be more pro-social, which I believe we need more and more these days. So there's a positive output, not only for us, because we're calmer, are able to problem solve more effectively. Not only that, but it means that the people around us benefit because they're not having to face this individual who's a little bit spiky, a little bit up and down, a little bit all over the place emotionally. Just thinking about a boss for a second, we've probably all had a boss. You may well have a boss right now. The boss, if they are grumpy all the time, at least you know what to expect. If we have a boss who's like really happy and your best friend one day and really grumpy and miserable or bad-tempered the next day or even the next hour, that's unsettling. Most people would rather have someone who was grumpy all the time because at least they know what to expect. They would rather ultimately have a boss who was kind and full of goodwill and humour. Yes, of course. Well, my point being, if we tend to move around up and down that emotional spectrum too quickly and for no good reason, ultimately, just these little things that happen that we might overreact to, or we might just simply get into the habit of reacting and we just explode and people go, what on earth is wrong with you? And maybe we can't even pinpoint it. So becoming calmer, I suppose, overall would not only would benefit us, but would benefit people around us. And you may say, well, I'm like that all the time, in which case, congratulations, fantastic, genuinely. But I have found over the years that considering the play analogy, or the movie analogy if you prefer, and the fact that how we interact with people, when we meet them, when we have those interactions, again I come back to what we say, how we say it, when we say it, and what our behaviours are, can have such a knock-on effect. And over time, if we're constantly improving ourselves, then ultimately, in my opinion, better things will happen around us. But what do you think? Let me know. Is that something that you find useful? Because I have more strategies and ideas about that, and maybe we can set something up where there are live calls, etc. I'll have a think about it. If you have subscribed, again, as I've said before, thank you so very much. It does make a difference. I'm trying to increase the subscriber level to grow this channel more because I think we can do more with it and we can enjoy more interactions, content, and guests who I believe you'll find interesting. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And also, if you think there are other people around who might enjoy this channel, please let them know about it. The content is a little bit eclectic, but as I've described before, there are a couple of threads running through it. And I believe they're all about raising awareness for us so we can enjoy life in all its glory and also avoid some of the pitfalls that may be self-inflicted or maybe other people would like us to fall into. Anyway, for the moment, from me, bye for now.